Welcome to Open Source Spotlight. We invite open source authors and ask them to show the tools they're working on. Today we have Duncan. Hi, Duncan. Tell us a few words about yourself and about the tool you want to show us.
Hi, thanks, Alexei. Thanks so much for having us on here. So I'm Duncan Blythe. I founded SuperDuperDB, which is an open source project on GitHub, uh, open source under SuperDuperDB/SuperDuperDB. And this is an open source project, Python package to enable developers and data scientists to easily bring AI to their database. And so what does that mean? That means you have data in your data store, database, and you want to connect it with your AI functionality, whether that be AI models, classical machine learning models, vector search, AI APIs, so a range of different things from the AI ecosystem. And the history and the background of that is that, coming from a mathematical background, I always struggled with why is it so difficult and such a pain to go from your abstract, mathematical model to actually productionizing and getting to something you can actually try. And there are many reasons for that. The tooling is just in its infancy and it's gradually getting more mature, and it has done throughout the years since 2008 when I started with machine learning. But still, it's not there yet. And ideally, if we're working on AI, we'd like to be in this kind of abstract realm of algorithms, concepts, and so forth to really get to something of high quality. And so what we've done is baked in many different design decisions about deploying AI and in combination with data so that you can just stay in this algorithmic realm and query your data and let the tool do the work for you after that.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I really want to see it in action.
Yeah, sure. So thank you. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay. Okay, so you should be able to see my browser now. And I've navigated to our open source project on GitHub. You see, we just released version 0.1 3 days ago, so please check it out and investigate all of the content here that we've prepared for you. So there's a lot to see here. Obviously, the code and the Python package. We've got documentation. So if you navigate to our docs, you'll find much more comprehensive introductions. We've got a blog, use cases, which are notebooks. I'll show you those in a second. And these notebooks you can actually execute live in your browser. So not by Binder or JupyterLab, it's sorry, by a Colab. It's a dedicated environment for you. Exactly. And I'll just scroll down to an image of how this works. So essentially, you have your database data store, which holds your data of interest, which you like to make intelligent in some sense by connecting with AI functionality. And SuperDuperDB, the Python package, is connected to your data store, and it ingests documents, data from there, and repopulates the data store with models, model outputs, features, vectors, and also the results of model trainings if you want to train your models. And this can all be controlled in your favorite Python tooling via scripts and Jupyter notebooks. And then the result of these configurations, these we call them components, can then be exposed to downstream applications very easily. And because everything's in Python, so we're Python first, we don't demand that users do this through GUIs or specialized programming languages. You can then really easily integrate with, for instance, Fast API, the favorite tools that you're used to deploying your apps with. So that's the big
Some sort of proxy for the database, or it's a thing like
no
still there?
yeah, it's not a proxy. So the database is the database. You connect to it with our client in order to trigger this functionality. But you can also use native clients, official drivers for your database, and we can set up a scalable environment with SuperDuperDB using the Python package, but which has different components. For instance, we have workers via Dask, and we're working on array workers as well. Then we have a change data capture component, which then polls or listens to your database for changes. And then dependent on those changes, jobs are deployed on the workers. But you can also deploy this in a kind of in-process, single thread mode just to get started. And the Python package is essentially the toolkit to decide how you do that and to get started with. You'll see in the notebooks, which I'll show you in a second.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Exactly. So I'm going to show just quickly 4 examples here, and I'll execute one of them. So we support not just chatbots and vector search, which is all the rage in 2023. We actually support and intend to support the full range of things you like to do with machine learning in combination with data. So just as classic MNIST, ML, transfer learning, questioning docs, and video search. And you can see all of them on the open source repo. And now I'm going to just go through one of those, but bear in mind, this is not just about video search. This is very general, but here's just one example of what you can do and shows the power. And then I'll go through much slower. How about that?
Yep. So
Okay.
I edit a note.
Okay. So I'll go back to this point here. Okay. Are we ready? Okay, so you'll see on the repo at the top that there's an examples directory. So if you click in here, you'll see a bunch of different Jupyter Notebook examples, all sorts of things, different types of database, MongoDB, SQL, different applications. And I'll show you just one of those, video search today, because it's kind of fun and shows you the power of the method. Suffice to say that you can do many things with SuperDuperDB, including your classical algorithms. For instance, just the hello world of machine learning MNIST, using a PyTorch model. We've got transfer learning, so 2 models working together to do sentiment analysis. And then very popular in 2023, building a functionality which allows you to question your documentation using the OpenAI API and vector search. And the last thing, which I'll just go through in more detail, is actually searching through videos using open source models, everything from open source. So I'll go through this now, and please, Alexei, stop me if there's any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
already wondering, like, do you actually put a video in a database?
So the user puts it in the database, but
Uh,
actually under the hood, that's not what's happening.
uh
So
Yeah,
So
tell me
the,
more.
the aim of SuperDuperDB is to have this familiar, just insert some data, connect a model, and then it works. But actually, that's part of the magic, is that it's clear that for something large like a video, you wouldn't want to put that in a database, but you want to connect the dots between your database and these big blobs that you're using, and just to not worry too much. And we've sort of pre-suffered that pain ourselves. Yeah, so you'll see. So in this video, sorry, in this notebook, we'll look at this video. There's just different animals. You can insert multiple videos of whatever you like. It can be of different lengths, but I'll just show using this one example, and you'll find this same video on the repo. There are some prerequisites which you can install to get this thing working. We're connecting SuperDuperDB with OpenCV and OpenAI. Sorry, OpenAI's CLIP model. And the first step in this is to connect to your database with SuperDuperDB. So we have this magic wrapper here, SuperDuper. So what you just need to do is take the URI of your database, import this wrapper, and then you get a connector DB, which is like, you can think of it as like our client to do what we want to do with your database. And I'm going to use a collection. And in this one, we're using MongoDB as the database. So I've connected successfully. And yes, so we're now ready to go. So something that you'll see again and again in the examples is that we have special data types, for instance, videos, images, and they're usually not supported by your database, pretty much never. And so what we need to do is find ways to work with this special data and your database. So we have the concept of an encoder. And in this case, we're defining an encoder, which allows us to work with videos. And I'll gloss over that a little bit here, but you can read more about that on the documentation. So this is how I'm allowing my models to work with video types. So I'm adding it to the system, and you'll see this again and again. When we have an important piece of functionality, we do add, which you can think of as like applying this component to the system. Okay, so now I'm going to insert in inverted commas the video to my collection.
What
So
you insert is actually an URL to the video, right? So
yeah,
not the binary.
right. So it's a big pain to have to fetch data yourself and to download it and manage this whole life cycle. So we baked in this functionality that it will pull in if you add URIs with these encoder types, that the system will pull in the data that it needs. And because of the way I've configured the system, it doesn't actually store the raw data, the raw video in the system, but it connects the file that you download with a hash of that file in the database. Right. So you can see that the video was downloaded. This happened in a job, so it scales. And now if we query the database, we can see it. We've got one document in the video collection, which refers to this video. So that will be in here. Okay. So now we've inserted one video to SuperDuperDB. In the next step, I'm going to do what's necessary to make it easy to search through that video. So I'm going to define a model using OpenCV, which I'm going to define right here. So it's completely open to you how you do this. So you can integrate any open source functionality you like in your models. That's the beauty of using Python. This OpenCV model or extractor is going to take frames out of the video and save those in the database. Okay. So the details aren't important, but basically this function here is going to be wrapped in our model wrapper. So it's a function, but we consider it as a model. So it's kind of an abstract term.
I can put whatever I want there. Like it can be any Python code, right?
Yes, but we have enhanced support for things like PyTorch and transformers, so I can get into that later in the questions. So now I've wrapped this function with the model wrapper. Okay, and I've given it some information about what the output is going to be like, so images. And now I'm going to use this component listener, which essentially says when new data comes in, recognize that data and map that data with this model. So that's why we call it a listener. So on the moment when I create this component with the db add command, the model that we've defined is going to be applied to the input data, which is actually the video that we inserted, and is going to map with this model to the output collection, which is here. And what that does is because of the way we've defined our model, it then extracts frames from this video and saves them. And you can see that here. These are actually now in the database. So there's one frame of the video. And now, downstream from that, I'm going to define two more models to be able to search through those frames. So this is OpenAI's Clip model, which has been on open source for a while now. And I've just imported them. So install, import. And I'm using, for this one, actually Torch model, because these are PyTorch models. And that gives me additional functionality like device acceleration, training, and so forth. So that's an enhanced support, but it's downstream in the class hierarchy from model. And then I'm ready to create search over this video. So I have a new listener, which is listening for incoming vectors from sorry, incoming images from the video, and it's going to turn those in turn into vectors, right? And then I'm defining another one here, which is, so to say, compatible. So I can use it to search through those vectors as well, to make the system complete. Okay, and this is being wrapped with this vector index class. And the whole thing is going to be added to the system. And when I do that, you'll see more work is triggered. So what's happening here is this model is automatically recognizing what it needs to act on. It's seeing the images which have been extracted, and it's extracting them to vectors. And those vectors are then being saved back into the database. So, this takes a while, depending on whether you have a hardware, so specialized hardware, a GPU, and we provide support for massive parallelization of this workload. But on my local client, this is just testing, takes a few minutes. Okay, and now you remember the video was a video of animals. So as an end user, I simply want to have a query which allows me to search through this video with for instance, natural language. So what I'm going to do is going to find a hybrid query, which consists of a vector search part and a classical database part. So if you know MongoDB, if I commented out that, this is basically a classic MongoDB query. And if I add this, I'm adding a vector search component. So I'm saying the results of this query must be like my query term. So like being kind of our familiar term for take this input and use vector search and AI to compare whether it's like this thing, right? And I'm using as the measure of what is like this video search index, which is actually the thing which I defined previously. So if I do that, you see that the vectors have been loaded and a search has been executed using vector search. And I could even modify this, and if I had some metadata in here, modify by brand or whatever. So it's very flexible. And the flexibility derives from the fact that I'm using the underlying database to perform this search. So vector search plus underlying database, AI, database, model, everything coming together to produce this really
Here I can use whatever MongoDB client can do, right? I can use all that functionality. Plus, on top of that, I can use this like
exactly right.
Like, okay.
And this is just one example. So don't forget, this is video search, which I believe. So that was the result of the search. So you recall the search was some monkeys playing. I can just do another example to prove it wasn't a fruit. So elephants. Yeah. And this would work with many videos. You can play with the parameters of the extractor that are extracting the frames. You can add whichever models you like to turn those frames into vectors. And everything, can be combined with bits and pieces from the open source ecosystem or things that you've written yourself to create an app like this. And if you look back through this, there's a lot of text and description, but actually it's just 3 or 4 commands to get this thing to work. And yeah, so
what if my colleague who is unaware of SuperDuperDB connects to the same database, to MongoDB, and inserts a new video? What happens?
Right. So there's basically two ends of the spectrum of how we expect people to deploy this. One is you're experimenting on your local client with your models, and you just have there's this is happening in process, and the preparation, you see it in the foreground. Then we have professional mode, which is intended eventually to be deployed scalably on Kubernetes in the cloud, in-house. And there, this would work slightly differently. So in the background, you would have workers that are, scalable, and they'll be waiting for work to come in. And there's another component. I can just show you this on the documentation. There's another component here, change data capture, which is listening to the database for changes. So if he then inserted a video from where he is, that would then trigger the scheduler to submit more work. So that would mean that the workers would see this job, which was submitted by this component, and say, hey, there's a new video there. I'm going to map that to images. And then those images will be inserted back to the database, which will trigger more work because now we have another component, which is listening for images to come into this other collection. And so the whole thing would sort of have this, this responsive character. And so if he were to insert another video, then I would be able to search for his video from my client.
It's kind of stored procedures in a way, right?
Yes, so stored procedures, the thing about stored procedures is that you're stuck with the system that's in there, right? And so what we're trying to do is provide this via like essentially like a sidecar implementation, but with full configurability to use whatever functionality you like, as long as you can install it via Python. And
Yeah,
it's,
that's pretty cool.
yeah, so, sorry.
Okay. So which means that in this current example, right now nothing happens, but if it's deployed, right, then if this data layer is enabled, then the colleague can insert whatever they want, and then all the things we discussed will be triggered, right? But right
Yes.
now, since it's a local thing, you need to insert through the SuperDuperDB interface.
Yes, exactly. So he could even use a JavaScript client to do this or whatever. And but my code for setting up would always be the same. So I could even shut this down, restart in cluster mode, and the thing would then run scalably. So that's a cool thing. So the path from experimentation to production is envisaged to be like super smooth and all full code sharing. Yeah, and that's sort of our vision to have standards to slot into the open source ecosystem so that people are familiar with the models that they're using and the ways that we use them, and to use things like ORMs and standards in on the data side to make this whole thing very nice for the developer and users.
And as I understood, it currently works for MongoDB, and then I saw a bunch of other databases like
Yeah.
MySQL.
Exactly. So we
What
have
else?
support for MongoDB, and then for our IBIS project, we have support for the major SQL databases and some data lakes as well. Oh, sorry, data warehouses such as Snowflake. So you can see that on here. Yeah, Postgres.
It's amazing, like already so much stuff, and it's only 0.10 version, or
Yeah, so we obviously like we're
pretty
trying to
amazing.
be conservative. Thank you, by the way. We're trying to be conservative with the versioning, but there's also the method I believe is the right one. And so by working with Python and making that our path to implementation and deployment of choice, we're able to then leverage great projects from the open source system ecosystem, such as IBIS and SQL Alchemy and so forth, to make this work. Yeah,
Because they
so
already provide the unified interface to all these databases, right? Data
exactly.
stores.
And so then it's like on our path going forward, it's a question of like if something isn't supported there, what's the most elegant way and that is familiar to users to integrate this new data store that we can find.
And for how long have you actually been working on it? Because like even though the latest version is only 3 days old, I don't think you worked on this only for 3 days, because it looks like an immense amount of work actually. Like you
Yeah.
probably put a lot of effort there. So
Oh,
for
thank
how?
you. Yeah, so we're more than one person, so that we're about 7 people. We've been working consistently on this version for a year. But there's a lot of findings and experience from years of doing this type of thing. And in the previous startup, we worked on managing many customers of e-commerce, search and navigation via AI. Um, and there was just PyTorch and MongoDB. But the principles we then generalized and went beyond e-commerce and went beyond MongoDB and went beyond PyTorch.
So that's a problem you saw at your previous job, and
Yeah,
you thought, okay, like it's a common problem, right? And you thought, okay, like how quick can we put it as a product on top of a database?
yeah. I mean, it's not just my previous job. It's always been a struggle. So back in, when I started as a master's student in 2008, we were using like SunGrid clusters to deploy Python and MATLAB scripts, and it was always a pain to get started. And so that's where the thinking began. And when we really started to do production, and to manage deployments in data intensive application domains such as e-commerce, it was clear that the database had to be a central variable in what we're doing. And it also has many nice side effects to do that, which is, for instance, model versioning becomes very transparent because when you train a model, you use a query to trigger the extraction of the training data, and you log that query in the system, and then you have a very nice record of how these models arose. That's just one example, and there's many others.
So 7 people have worked on this for a year, right? And do you currently accept external contributions?
Yes, yes. So we're open source Apache 2. We're on GitHub. We would love to welcome contributors, and we have an open source Slack, an open Slack channel account that you can log into and discuss. And we'll probably in the next months also ramp up, you know, community stand-ups and syncs and so forth.
You have like some good first issues already?
Yeah, we've had a few contributions already. Yeah,
No, I
exactly.
mean like let's say somebody wants to contribute, and in some projects there is label good first issue. So for
Ah, I
for the
see. I
new
see.
people who
Yeah, we
want to
have a few,
try,
we have a few, but not so many. So there's still some work to do there. We've been super busy with the launch, but that's definitely on the menu for the next
okay.
week.
So if somebody wants to contribute, the best way is to join your Slack, find a channel for that, and ask, hey, like introduce themselves, and then say, hey, like I want to contribute. What's the best way? Like, what's the good first issue? Help me, right?
Yes.
I see. Oh, that's cool. And so now that you released this version, what are your plans? What do you want to do next?
Right. So we're currently working, and you can follow this on our open source roadmap, which is there's a project on um, on our Python project here, OSS, and you can see two views. And on the roadmap view, you can see what's sort of next. And that's so this will be the next month. That will be doing things via Ray, which will allow us to be more scalable and provide better support for a range of large language models from the ecosystem. So Llama 2 and so forth. So that's definitely something where feedback and contributions is welcome. And then support for other data source. So for instance, Apache Iceberg has been quite popular recently, and so that's something we would like to investigate. And then if I just zoom out a bit, we're also looking for higher support for productionization, and that will be there. So yeah, that's next on the menu. And then in the on the enterprise kind of company side, we're also looking to provide support to actually click together an environment where you can deploy this and use it in a serverless way from your browser.
So there is a cloud version that you plan
We're
to.
planning on that, yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, thanks for doing all this development completely in public with GitHub. Like, it's amazing. It's so transparent, and everyone can just go there and check what you're up to. Yeah, that's.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So do you? It's the last question. Do you have any advice to anyone who is watching this?
Advice.
Life
General
advice
advice
or
about
technology
using.
advice, tool advice, whatever.
Well, I mean, my advice is so I mean, one thing that we've learned from watching this AI revolution kind of unfold is that um, there's a lot of sort of closed source and also open source, and there's two kind of conflicting energy flows. One is to pull you into some kind of vendor lock-in, and the other is to make you free. And my advice would be, if you're a developer, just look around for open source options which allow you to retain the power and the control of your deployment. Because as the thing develops, I think we'll get much better support on open source and maybe even better results potentially. So there's new initiatives between Facebook and IBM, for instance, to create much more open AI models. And then we have projects like Ray, and what we're trying to do is in a similar spirit, which will allow you then to take these types of models and have full control in your own organization, in your own app. So don't get too seduced by being pulled into the cloud or OpenAI's APIs for your production use
It's
cases.
very simple to use the API, but there is cost. And cost is not only literal cost, the bill, but also the cost of like if the model is updated silently, all of your prompts may just stop working, right? Or
Right.
perform worse, or like whatever. You don't have any control. You don't
Right.
know what is the model, when it's updated, will it be updated or not. Right. But if it's running on your hardware and it's open source, then you have full control over what's happening.
Exactly. So I love the OpenAI API, and it's so useful to get started.
Very easy, yeah.
But if you bake it like natively into your stack as like an irreplaceable piece, you're subjecting yourself to like very high vulnerability and worries about, deprecation or changing features behind this API, and that's fine. But if what we're trying to do is like allow you to easily toggle between your in-house and the OpenAI thing, so you can sort of have both of both best worlds. Yeah, and I think this is a bigger topic in open source right now and development. Like, what's the way forward for developers with this AI?
Like I said, it would be the last question, but I cannot not ask this one.
Yeah, okay.
How did you come up with this name? Why is SuperDuperDB?
Oh yeah, the idea was you have a DB, and then when you use it with SuperDuperDB, it's super duper. So it's now a super. It's got like all the stuff that you kind of want to do with your data in it. So it's super duper.
That's a perfect explanation. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Duncan. I think that's all. So amazing demo, amazing product. Thanks for doing this in open source. And I'm really looking forward to watching how you continue working on the tool and develop it.
Thanks so much, Alexei. It's a
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you.